Patch 14.9 has been one of the strangest patches we've seen in a while, as it turns out the hitbox adjustments have actually been some of the most impactful changes of the patch. We'll be covering which champs have been positively influenced the most by this, along with a complete update on the solo queue tier list for every single role. Make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to stay up to date and so you don't miss out on next week's changes. And remember, if you're struggling to climb in League, SkillCapped is the only place that guarantees you'll climb at least 5 divisions while actively using our service. Otherwise, you can claim a full refund. We do this because our service really works, and this is the best time of the season to get in on SkillCapped, as we've just released tons of site-exclusive courses designed for you to power learn the most important concepts for climbing in League of Legends stupidly fast, compared to those who don't use SkillCapped. Join today for unlimited access to the world's most famously effective League of Legends guides, and remember, one subscription gives you access to all of our other games as well. So what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description below to stop wasting time being hard stuck and get the rank you actually want. And with that said, let's get into it. Up in the top lane, Darius was one champion who has benefited a ton from his hitbox being reduced, as it was lowered from 80 to 65. In turn, this change has resulted in Darius seeing a 1% spike to his overall win rate, which is actually quite significant. Considering Darius has been a very solid solo queue champ in previous patches, this kind of change is enough to push him over the top and make him one of the best top laners for solo queue. So we'll be moving Darius up the top lane tier list for mid-patch, going from S into OP tier. We noted in the pre-patch tier list that we were unsure exactly how much the Kennen quality of life changes would affect his solo queue strength, but now that the changes have been on live servers for a few days, we can confidently say they've been absolutely massive. The changes have led to Kennen's win rate spiking around 3% and have brought him back into a very strong spot for solo queue for the first time all season. His full burst combo is so much smoother to use, and executing engage plays are just way more consistent now that using R does not lock you in place. So Kennen is back to being the best ranged top laner in 14.9, as he's being pushed into the top lane S tier. If we have a look at how the top lane tier list is shaping out, we've got Darius and Trundle locking down the OP tier spots. As for how the fighter item nerfs have influenced the strength of certain top laners, it's really only champs who have been building Eclipse in combination with Sundered Sky that were hurt significantly. This is what we had predicted going into the patch, so it's really only champs like Riven and Renekton who have been feeling the effects of the item nerfs. Someone like Jax, however, who only builds Sundered Sky and not Eclipse, has seen a very minor drop off in win rate, so as a whole, the fighter item nerfs have really only influenced a select few champs. As if Cassante wasn't already in a terrible spot for solo queue, opposite of Darius, he actually had his hitbox increased from 65 to 80 and has lost about 2% win rate as a result. Definitely stay away from Cassante right now, as he's one of the weakest C tier picks. And before we head into the jungle, let's boost your win rate with SkillCapped's tip of the week. A really simple but super impactful thing to remember is that minion wave spawns are mirrored for both sides. So if you see your own wave here, then you know that the enemy wave is over here at the same time as well. Whenever you're interacting with a minion wave, you almost always want to keep this in mind, as it might screw you over if you don't. For example, let's say you're trying to crash a slow push and you decide to begin pushing now. This would be a mistake because we can predict that the reinforcing enemy wave is already very close. If you try to crash now, then the slow push will not end up crashing at the tower, but instead awkwardly crash right outside their tower. This could leave you with the wave frozen against you, potentially getting punished for your mistake. This is also useful for when you're crossing areas like this, where you'd only be spotted if an enemy wave was incoming. Right now is safe to pass through here since we know for certain no wave is in the area. And by knowing that waves are mirrored, we could also know that right now would be a terrible time to cross this point, since you'd get spotted by the passing wave. If you want to learn more game-changing wave control tips like these, then take our new Season 14 wave control course at SkillCapped. You can check it out with the link in the description below. Gaining over 4% to her overall win rate and moving up the tier list for mid-patch is Sejuani. Sedge buffs have turned out much more impactful than originally expected, as they've helped propel her from the bottom of the C tier into a very respectable spot. The buffs to Sedge passive were actually pretty massive, as you end up getting a ton of bonus resistances in the mid game. If you're looking to pick up Sedge for this patch, rushing Sunfire Aegis is pretty core for most games, while Thornmail and Canik Rookern are interchangeable second and third items. It's pretty standard for the rune page, as you'll want to be running Aftershock along with Precision Tree for secondaries. For Sejuani's tier list placement, we are giving her the bump from C into A. It wasn't just Sejuani who has seen a drastic rise in strength this patch due to her buffs, but Amumu as well. Base stat buffs are always super weird to predict as to how much strength they'll add to a champ, but for Amumu, the added base AD and armor have been huge. You wouldn't think that giving more base AD to an AP bruiser would be overly impactful, but Amumu's win rate has spiked over 2%. So 2 tanks back in great solo queue spots for 14.9, as Amumu will be moving up the tier list, going from B into S tier. If we have a look at the jungle tier list now, we've got a couple of adjustments for mid-patch, with Viego now moving up into the OP tier. To be honest though, there isn't really a true OP jungler for 14.9. Viego is the closest thing to it, but in general, there's just a lot of really good S tier picks who are in and around the same power level. As we mentioned when covering top lane, champs who don't rush Eclipse and go into Sundered Skies second really were not influenced at all by the fighter item nerfs, as even though Viego builds Sundered Sky, his win rate has actually gone up this patch. Lee Sin all of a sudden shot up to having one of the highest win rates for any jungler at the start of the patch, but it was all due to a bug which was causing his Q to deal more damage than intended. Riot has already issued a bug fix to combat this, and Lee's win rate has already dropped a few percentage points as a result. Champ is definitely much weaker than in 14.8, as the Eclipse and Sundered Sky nerfs have hit a decent amount, and we'll be leaving him in the B tier. As for the likes of Briar, she was actually one champ who received a hidden nerf this patch, with her hitbox being increased. Briar's hitbox was actually increased from 55 to 65, so that's more of an under-the-radar change that has negatively impacted her. We noted in the pre-patch tier list that we were expecting around a 3% drop in win rate for Skarner due to his nerfs, but they've actually landed more around the 4% mark. As a result, the champ has lost a bit more power than anticipated, so we're adjusting him out of OP and into S for mid-patch. Master Yi has been one of the biggest losers of 14.8, as his nerf has led to his win rate plummeting 3%. Taking off guaranteed damage from auto attacks is always going to hurt more than most other changes in the game, and losing 10 damage on E is quite a big hit overall. We definitely didn't think the nerf would kill Yi this bad, but he's fallen to the pits of the jungle tier list for 14.9, as we're moving him into the C tier. We noted early on in the video how Darius ended up gaining a good chunk of power due to its hitbox change, and there's one champ from mid lane who received the same change that has drastically shot up in strength. This champ is Vex, as her hitbox was lowered from 65 to 55. At first we were kind of confused as to why Vex gained a few percent to her win rate for 14.9, but it all makes sense when you dig into the details of the patch. As a result of this change, Vex is now one of the premier mid lane champs for solo queue and is being moved up into the OP tier. It wasn't just Vex who saw her hitbox lowered for this patch, as Zoe was a lucky winner as well. Zoe had the exact same collision radius as Vex at 65 heading into the patch, but it was lowered to 55 for 14.9. Zoe had been a pretty average mid lane champion prior to this buff, sitting in the B tier for the entirety of Season 14, but as a result of the change, we're pushing her up into A tier. Now, one mid lane champ who was on the negative side of the hitbox adjustments was Aurelion Sol. Riot actually increased the collision radius of Sol from 65 to 80, which has led to his win rate dropping out quite a bit. When considering Sol's tier list placement for the pre-patch tier list, we did not take into account the hitbox nerf, so we're going to be moving him further down the tier list for mid-patch, going from S into A tier. So we finally have a new look to the mid lane tier list in 14.9, as Ahri and Aurelion Sol are no longer highest priority, while Brand and Vex lock down the OP tier slots. We had moved Brand up into the OP tier for pre-patch, and we like that adjustment even more as we've seen the data come in for 14.9. If you guys are looking to pick up some Brand mid, our challenger mid laner Hector has a brand new full game commentary for the champ on our website. One thing you wouldn't really expect out of Brand mid is that he plays very well into a lot of meta melee champs. Consistent poke from E is very difficult for melee champs to dodge, and if they end up trying to jump straight onto Brand, it's actually quite easy to hit Q and stun them. An interesting stat line for Brand in 14.9 consists of the champ winning over 55% of the time against Yasuo, Yone, and Sylas. The beauty of Brand as well is that you don't even need to hard smash lane to be impactful with him. The AoE damage output from Leandries come mid-game teamfights is huge, and you don't even need to be super fed to deal loads of damage. In the grand scheme of things, nothing really changed for the ADC meta in 14.9. We expected the Jinx nerf to hit a little more than it did, but her win rate has literally gone up this patch, so we're moving her back into OP tier. Neela nerfs were really the only changes that moved the needle in any significant way, as she ended up losing a few percent to her overall win rate. With the new anti-cheat system being added to League for this patch called Vanguard, we have seen it impact a few champions, interestingly enough. Champs that people would script on a ton, like Ezreal and Zeri, have both seen a decline in win rate for 14.9. With Seraphine's Q-AP ratio buffed for this patch, she's back to being a really strong AP carry pickup. Play rate of the champ will never end up being very high, but if you want a strong pocket pick to pull out when your team has drafted heavy AD, Seraphine is definitely the best option now moving forward and will be bumped into the S tier. So all in all, Jinx is still the queen of the ADC meta. Kog'Maw is right in behind, while Jhin sits below them as one of the best S tier picks. There were a couple of supports who saw their hitboxes reduced for this patch and have seen an increase in strength as a result. Melio is one of those champs, as Riot lowered his collision radius from 65 to 55. A whole 1% has been added onto Melio's win rate, and with Melio Emilio being a very good S tier pick prior to this change, we're bumping him into OP for mid-patch. Lulu was the other support whose hitbox was lowered, as Riot reduced it from 65 to 55 as well. Lulu had been slightly weaker than Emilio for solo queue prior to this change, so even with this buff, we won't be moving Lulu into the OP tier as she'll remain a very good S tier pick. Overall though, enchanters as a whole are back on top for 14.9, as Lulu, Emilio, Sona, and Janna are all super strong options. The support tier list is looking pretty similar to where we had it for pre-patch, with the OP tier consisting of Sona and Braum. However, Nami is dropping down into S tier to make room for Emilio. Honestly, all the nerfs to support for 14.9 were more placebo than anything else, as the relative strength of Janna, Blitz, and Pyke have not gone down much at all. All of those champs lost a little bit of win rate, but not a significant amount to where they aren't still strong solo queue options. We've definitely seen a big priority shift as of recent in the support role though, as enchanters are the more dominant class at the moment. Melee supports who were high priority at the beginning of the season, like Maokai and Blitz, have taken the back seat, while enchanters like Nami, Sona, Soraka, Lulu, Emilio, and Janna are all super good for 14.9. Alright guys, one last thing, our rank up guarantee is insane. It's like signing up for the gym and getting a refund if you don't get ripped. That's how confident we are in SkillCapped. We obsess over making the best guides with top players, rigorous testing, and top tier video editing to make your climb easy. If you're ready to level up, visit skillcapped.com and see the difference. So there you have it guys, a complete look at how the solo queue tier list is shaping out as we reach the midway point of 14.9. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you back soon.